Hello and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Hanapin Marketing. Today's topic is how to turbocharge your account with modified AdWords scripts. So this is a topic that we've discussed quite a bit over the past, well, I'd say about 9 months or so. I know we kind of started discussing this in earnest back in about January or February because that's when we started to see some really cool stuff come out of AdWords scripts. And today we're going to talk to you about how to take those scripts, some of those existing scripts and maybe some new ones, to the next level by customizing them with just a couple of snippets of code to create some new and interesting reports that can give you some insightful account information that can inform how you make changes in your account going forward. So, my name is Eric Couch. I'm a senior account manager here at Hanapin Marketing. I'm also a blogger at PPC Hero. You can get in touch with me at eCouch11 on Twitter. And today I'm joined by my regular partner in crime, Jake Fairclough.
Hey everyone, I'm also an account manager at Hanapin Marketing and a blogger at PPC Hero too. And you can find me on Twitter at RealSecretJake. Kind of a small little joke in the office because apparently it's weird to go by both Jake and Jacob.
We called him Jacob for about a year. Like, we'd known him for a year, and then he said, oh, by the way, people usually just call me Jake, which after you've known a guy for 12 months, that's dropping bombs. So so he was Secret Jake all along. And this is actually kind of his coming out party for Twitter. So get at him, follow him, send him a couple of messages, and welcome him to 2013. Really, it's about time.
Catching up. I also just got on MySpace.
Wow. Okay, that's a little bit more outdated. But moving on. So if you'd like to join in on the conversation today, be sure to include the hashtag ThinkPPC in your Twitter tweets. And you might also want to consider including @RealSecretJake, since, again, he just joined. Or you can always use the webinar question box to just send up some questions. In addition, you can get exclusive access to all of today's scripts on PPC Hero Pro with our extended trial code at the end of today's webinar. Our usual free trial is just 7 days, but since you were all kind enough to attend today's webinar, we've extended that free trial to 30 days. So I know Jake has done a little bit of work on the scripts library, so you want to go into a little bit about what we have there?
We have quite a few things. We'll have all of these, plus some ones that we've made in-house, from custom alerts to different types of reporting, different ways to manipulate an account, and 2 new things that came out today are a statistical significance calculator for your ads, as well as a script that automatically pulls your metrics and then kind of projects out the rest of the month, so you always kind of keep an eye on it.
Yeah, so it's a really great offer. We hope you guys appreciate the opportunity to take advantage of it, and we'll have more about that at the end. So I guess, without further ado, it's kind of time to dive in with our first live poll question. So, what has been your favorite automation tool in 2013? So what about you, Jake? I think I might know the answer to this one, but so what has it been?
I would probably have to say AdWords scripts. One of my favorite things is that, we really started, it came out last year, but we started really pushing on it early this spring.
Right.
I guess winter, early in January. But we just, Google kept adding more and more features to it and making it more and more accessible. So I found a lot of use in using that.
Right. And so the other options we have up here, just to explain them if you don't already know about them. So automated rules, so some of the basic in-interface stuff you can program in AdWords to say, so if your cost per conversion is above X, then do Y to the bid. VBA/macros, so that is Excel functionality. So we've actually, that'd be my choice because we've made some really nice templates with Excel macros that can create some really interesting reports, pretty much just from a report that you download straight from the AdWords interface. And then other third-party tools, there could be some other web-based platforms or bid management software that can help you streamline the account management process.
Wow, we actually have a tie between AdWords scripts and automated rules. Looks like there's a small selection like to use the VBA macros and other third-party tools, but yeah, definitely interesting.
But yeah, an even split between scripts and automated rules. So hopefully those of you who are here for the scripts will find some stuff that you're interested in, and also that the rest of you, maybe we can convert you. I don't, no guarantees, but that's the goal. So moving on, our second live poll question. So based on your experience, do you plan on using automated solutions? And how much in the future do you plan on it? So I think for both of us, we're pretty solidly in the more in the future camp, especially as these features start to get more and more fleshed out. But I guess if you're already using it quite a lot, maybe you're not going to plan on it. So what about you, Jay?
For me, more in the future, I don't necessarily see us going to fully automated solutions, but I think there's so many routine tasks that we have to do every day. Yeah. Just like you said with the VBA macros, it makes it really easy just to format things the way you want them rather than spending the time doing it.
Yeah, I know I'm probably a bit too much of a control freak to entirely cede control of my account to like automated solutions, but yeah, as you said, the routine stuff is definitely an option there. And it looks like most of you agree with us. So a whopping 89% of respondents have said they plan on using automated solutions more in the future. And then nobody said less in the future. So that's incredibly encouraging. So
we don't have any Luddites in our midst.
Yeah. All right. So I guess it's time to just dive right in now into the actual scripts. So just to give you kind of a brief overview, this will be really short, just to get any of you out there unfamiliar with AdWords scripts caught up. So it's based on the popular JavaScript language. So it's everywhere out there on the internet now. You can go to pretty much any website and find an instance of JavaScript on it. Mostly because they all have an analytics cookie on it, which makes use of JavaScript. But these codes, it allows you to customize the code to automatically make changes or pull data. And you can use it for just a couple of sample cases. You can use it for reporting, bid and budget changes, new ads and ad groups, and so much more. And that's kind of Jake's tagline, so he'll add that in.
Yeah, there's quite a few things you can do. One of the cool things that they just released is something called Adwords Query Language, which allows you to kind of pull data from the reporting API. So you can get things like geolocations, your search query report. And one of the cool things that we were able to do is set it up so it looks at your automated placements and pulls from those and says, you should pause this based on your CPA goals.
Yeah, so it looks like this is just one of those new functionalities that's going to help us automate the process. So doing a placement audit can be kind of time consuming, especially if you have thousands of URLs in there. So this can help with that process, and it's brand new. So we'll talk about it a little bit later on. But I just wanted to kind of give you guys a preview of some of the other topics that we might have. So where to find AdWords scripts? So they haven't moved. They're still in the same spot. You can find them in the bulk operations section of the AdWords interface, nestled right in between automated rules and bulk edits. So if you want to go through the process of adding scripts into your account, we've already put out both a couple of webinars about that exact topic and some posts. But you just click on Create and Manage Scripts, and then there's a big button that says Create Script, and then it's just a matter of writing/copying and pasting stuff in there. So it's a super easy process, way less painstaking than I would initially think, being entirely new to coding. So
yeah, everything you need is already built into the interface for it. They made it really easy with both the code editor and it executes in the interface. So you just have to go to the page, and it's pretty straightforward. So
definitely do some digging there. All right, so our first script is how to create a new text ad. So we have the link to the original script, and this can be found in, so what does Google call it now?
I think it's actually just called by create a new text ad, and if you look at blue up there, it's links to the Google page, so you can, if you want to use this or make the modifications yourself.
Right, so it's Google Solutions now,
yes.
Right? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay, but we thought this would be a good intro because ads are pretty standard. They're a great place to start automation. One of the things that if you weren't using a script, you would just be in Excel copying and pasting or dragging.
Writing ads, doing all kinds of arcane functions in Excel to create ad copy for, gosh, as many as a couple thousand ad groups maybe on a very bad day, or maybe even more. I know in some of the accounts you've worked in, there are way more ad groups than that.
Especially if you're in a campaign, especially in education, you can think of there's lots of different variations of the program, so you can end up with just thousands and thousands of ad groups.
Oh my gosh!
And those spreadsheets get very big, and sometimes maybe you have custom URL parameters. So we won't go into that today, but it's relatively easy to go ahead and create a template in your script that automatically inserts, the UTM campaign and then takes the campaign name and includes it in there.
Yeah, so I know even with, gosh, yeah, even adding in some of that custom tracking information, just even analytics, if you're not making use of manual tags, or yeah, some of the more advanced URL tracking you can do to interface with CRM platforms, it can get kind of complicated. So automating the process to append that information to a destination URL can save you a lot of time, in addition to the actual writing of the copy too. So what changes in the particular script that you created? Because this is something this is an all modification that you have made to the script, right?
Yes, and what we did with this was, especially why this is an intro, because this is very cool. Just by modifying one line, we can really change the way that the script performs. And better yet, on the one that Google has, if you aren't looking at it, what it does is it searches for an ad group name that you input, and then it searches for that ad group and then puts an ad in there. But if you do it just like that, you're going to keep running the scripts one at a time, ad group by ad
each
group
individual
by
ad group. Okay.
So over here, we're going to quickly go, what if your campaigns are segmented in a way where you just apply the same ad to every ad group in your campaign? We can do that. And secondly, we can also just very quickly show how you can use labels.
Okay, well, let's see how it happens. So we're going to go out into the wild of an actual script as opposed to a PowerPoint slide. So why don't you break down a little bit, like at a high level, about this particular script?
One thing I'd like to just start out with is this is going to look a little different than the interface that's used in Adwords. And I chose to go with this Sublime Text 2. It's a text editor because it showed up a little bit. Oh, it showed up a little. Sorry, I thought there was an audio issue there. It showed up easier than going through the Adwords interface. Because one of the things on here is it has a black background rather than the white, and you can kind of contrast against the pieces in the script. So what we're looking at right here is the original one. You've right here a variable ad group name. And if you are familiar, a variable is just something that you assign a value. One of the ways I explain it to people is it's a variable kind of like just an algebra. So anytime you call ad group name, it's going to represent this value right here.
So in this case, going back to the kind of the algebra metaphor, x equals ad group name number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And what that allows you to do is just plug in that variable in different parts of the script rather than continuously writing it over and over again.
Okay.
So what we're doing right here, to give you a quick overview, is the ad groups iterator. And what that does is it iterates and goes through all of your ad groups. And this one right here goes through all your ad groups and searches for the with condition. The name is equal to this ad group name up here.
Okay.
If that makes any sense, which it sounds
No,
like
it does. It does.
So one of the things we can do is we have our ad groups with condition. You can kind of think of these, you see these periods and these kind of, I guess you call them commands, they're called methods here.
Yeah.
And kind of help people, make that jump. It looks scary at first, but you can think of this in the parentheses, it runs almost exactly like an Excel formula.
Right.
So it's just looking for certain values to make those changes.
So when you're making like a change to a script like this, how much are you actually changing? So it looks like in order to make it just focus on the campaigns, it might be just changing a couple of lines of text.
Yep, and this is one of the things that you'll have to probably look at the reference material for. But they are all pretty standard. So for this one, with condition, okay, it starts with the caps. Oh.
Campaign name
is equal. Then we come up with the same part. And instead of using the ad group name up here, you don't have to rename it, but if you're ever looking back, it's easier to remember if you call it that. Campaign name is equal to campaign 1. And we'll just pretend, we have our campaign called campaign 1.
Right.
And what this is going to do now is instead of looking for an ad group with the condition of an ad group name, it's going to look for with condition campaign name is equal to, I guess we'll have to put that in real quick, campaign name, and then inputs that, and then it searches for anything within that campaign and then returns all the ad groups. And then what it does next is after it pulls all of those, we have this logic statement right here, this if.
Right.
And inside that, you see the parentheses, if this iterator up here, this variable has anything inside. Doesn't have anything inside, sorry, I skipped a little bit. The exclamation point means not true.
Right.
So if it doesn't pull anything, then it's going to do this logger log, and that just gives you an error message basically and says, we can't find it, it's not found.
Right, so basically this is just checking, like, I'm trying to figure out the right term for it, but it's a sanity checker, like saying, yeah, this thing is actually here, so or not here, so we can do something with it.
Pretty much, it lets you know what the problem is.
Right.
So if that ever comes up, I probably typed in the wrong campaign. Maybe I have an extra space in there somewhere. Maybe I misspelled campaign, like I was trying to do earlier on the example. I mixed up my M and A. What it does is else it assigns the add group variable to the next thing in this bucket. You can think of the iterator as just a giant bucket full of things, different add groups in this case. And then for each add group, it goes and creates an add, and this is where you'll also need to make the changes because you don't want an add that just says add headline, first line of description.
Well, maybe you do. I don't want to entirely discount the ad copy that's in place, but this is where you'd actually like input the copy that you would associate with the ad groups in that campaign. So essentially, this little second half, the second snippet of the script is saying, so if this ad group is not here, then it gives you that error, but if it does, then we put the ad in it, right?
Yes. And then kind of show you how flexible this is, and then we'll move on to the next one. Instead of campaign name, if you want to search by labels, the field name for that is just label name. And the easy way to think about these conditions right here is they're kind of like the different headings on a table. If you have these broken down, you can look by the label name, the ad groups. You can also search by the statistics that go along, the metrics that go along with this. So let's say there will be no reason to create an ad in an ad group that has more than 5 clicks, but you could also put clicks greater than 5, which is helpful when you're sorting for you.
Or potentially, like, just kind of spinning my wheels here, just thinking about it. So if this ad group has click-through rate that's less than this amount, then maybe it needs new ad copy.
New ad copy. That's a good example.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. That was entirely off the top of my head.
Okay, let's jump back into our presentation and go to the next one. That mode right there.
So this next one is actually one of the more helpful ones that we've discussed. Since I've seen this one in action, and it fixes one of the biggest issues that we came across with the initial implementation of scripts. So this is one where you can add new metrics to the keyword performance report. So there's another link to the original script here on the Google Solutions page. But the original script pulls keyword data and segments it by both quality score and average position. So it's something you can do with a report that you download from the interface and just pivot table it and do a little bit of stuff there, a little bit of data manipulation to get it into the right format. But the thing that's nice about this script is that originally this would be something you have to consciously do like on a regular basis in order to monitor this performance. But this, basically, you do a little bit of time to set it up, and then you just run it however many times you want, right?
Yes, and it's one of those things you said, it's pretty easy to do on your own, but that also means, when you get really busy, it's easy to just kind of push it off and just kind of forget about it because it's one of those small tasks. But one of the really interesting things is if you keep running this over time, it kind of gives you a breakdown over time. So you start seeing, how your average position changes, how your performance changes, or if you're in a situation where you're trying to improve your quality score, you can see how that changes because it's going to break down the number of each keywords at a certain level. And that reminds me of a client we had, and they had an issue with quality score coming in. So we went through this big restructure and everything, and I had these 2 tables shown, and I said, this is before we did the restructure, and this is we did after, and since.
Oh man, it is snowing / hailing here. I am not prepared for this. Okay, but yeah, so it sounds like with the implementation of this particular script,
it gives you a good benchmark over time.
Yeah,
and you can say, did this restructure actually help us? In this case, it did. And the client was, super happy to say, we have these to show you. And they can show it to their higher ups or whatever. You
can actually watch like the incremental change in quality score and the metrics that impact that like over time, which has been one of the biggest pain points with the AdWords interface. It's been that lack of historical quality score and being able to tie that into the performance data. So it's super helpful. But so what changes in this next script?
So this one's going to be a little more involved than the last one, but it's not necessarily any harder. one of the first things that really throws people off is, since we're putting it on a spreadsheet, we need to tell the AdWords script how to format it. You know, what are our headings? What are our columns? What's the data going to be on there?
Right.
So we have to change that. And second, we're going to need to have a way to pull those new metrics along with it.
Right.
Because kind of like we went over the variables before, the variables don't just represent you know, items of interest in the account, such as the metrics or certain words or phrases. It also holds the data. So if you don't have a variable for something, the script won't have anywhere to access it.
Okay. Yeah, and I know like the biggest issue we ran into with the initial script implementation is the lack of conversion data. So especially like for keywords and average position, you get clicks, impressions, click-through rate, and cost data, but you don't get, you know, the actual KPIs you may be measuring. So this is a good way to help you customize some of these scripts into adding some of that data in.
Mm-hmm. And then we'll start right off the top. And one note, if you go through the Google example up here, you'll see they already have something in the spreadsheet URL.
Yeah.
If you use that, you'll have to go ahead and expand it. On the older version, they had extra rows, but right now they've kind of, you know, locked the template down.
Right.
So if you would like, you can start your own spreadsheet URL with this, and then just implement that URL right here. But if you're going to do that, the one thing that threw someone off when I told them to do this is there's a get sheet by name here. So if you make your own, you're going to want to change this to the name of the sheet you're accessing.
Okay.
The Google template says report, but if you just make a stock one, it's going to be called sheet 1. So we'll actually go in and just pretend we're going to do that. So I made a new one. I didn't rename my sheet at all. I'm just going to call it sheet 1.
Okay.
So we go through this, you know, gets everything set up, sets up the spreadsheet.
So, okay, so this is where we define like the spreadsheet that this is going to go all into, correct? Like,
yes.
and the tab on the sheet. So it looks like this next part is where we start defining the actual columns, like the actual data on the sheet where it gets put in, right?
Mm-hmm. And right here, you're going to see a variable for the header. And as it's, you know, kind of explains, it's the header of the output. So these are going to be the measures across the top. So it's going to be quality score, number of keywords, impressions, clicks. But we want to add something else.
So this is where we start improvising and adding in some of that conversion data, right?
Yes, and one of the things we're going to do is add conversions.
Okay, it's easy enough.
Pretty straightforward. And the next one, we'll go ahead and put in conversion rate. So now we have those two. So when we generate a spreadsheet, it's going to put those 2 extra rows on there.
Right. So it creates those header columns, but we still don't have any data to put in there. And I know, so one of the issues that I've done a little bit of trying to modify these scripts, and the issue I always run into is that you have to be really consistent with how you modify the scripts across the board, because otherwise, like if you change one variable, it's not going to automatically update everything else. You have to define each change pretty much every single time it comes along. Like I know one that we've discussed previously is in like the line right below where you've entered in conversion rate. So if you can see it on the screen, this would be line 54. So you have to actually define the number of columns out that this extends to. So you see it right here where it says there's that 6 there. That's saying you need 6. It has 6 columns right now, and you have to change that, right?
Yeah, this is one of the things that's either it's great about scripts, or it can be very scary, is because when you are programming something, it's very logical.
Right.
So it's going to be expecting 6, but we just added 2, and this last column right here is for the width. So we're going to have to go ahead and just say, you know, we're adding 2, which makes it 8, and that sets the value of the header. Now the next thing we're going to look for is going in is kind of similar to what we had to do with the header. We had this thing called a quality score map that kind of defines our segmentation.
Right.
So one of the things we'll need is total conversions.
Almost there.
I'd say it's one of those things now I'm in that situation.
Oh my gosh.
I have professors who
so much
say
pressure.
This is the
so much
thing
pressure.
to do.
R. There we go. Oh,
Did
one more time.
Oh no. Conversions.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. And then we'll just set that to 0. And that's kind of like I was talking about earlier, you know, with these variables, they need to you need to what's called initialize them.
Right.
So set them to something. And since we don't have any data, it's fine just to set it to 0. But tell the script, I want to keep a little area open where I can store this value later.
Okay, gotcha.
Then we'll just go ahead and put in a conversion rate.
And those numbers, so that's kind of where you're defining the formatting too. So the 0.0 and 0, so we're talking about like decimal points?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's kind of a shorthand way of putting it in there.
Okay. Makes sense. I think it makes sense.
Yep. So now kind of going through, now we're going to go back, we talked about the iterators before, and this keyword iterator is going to start pulling in all our keywords from the last week that have impressions more than 0. So anything that, has triggered that impression or shown, this just kind of cuts down on that bulk of, pulling in lots of keywords that are paused or anything like that.
Right.
You can change these date ranges if you want. By default, this one goes to the last week, but you put it really well, Eric, when you said if you change it in one place, you should probably change it in another just to make some consistency.
So it looks like, so what kind of ranges could you change that to? So it looks like it defaults to the last week. So for some accounts, that may not be enough time to get any statistically significant data. So what kind of changes could you make to extend that date range?
You can set any date range you want.
Really?
For this, the easiest way, I tell people, if you just want to use those custom date ranges that Google uses,
so like
the pre-formatted
ones. So it'd be like last 30 days. You would make a change that would say like last _30 days. Is that correct?
Yes, and you can do the same for last 14 days, this month, last month, anything like that.
And then, so it looks like, so you're defining the date range, but then also the conditions that you're going to be using to populate this data. So potentially, I see that there's the condition of impressions greater than 0. You could possibly change that to like just your converting keywords. So, or just your keywords that have actually gotten clicks. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. You could also do other conditions. So if you have part of your account broken out by brand, you could find a way to use the with condition to segment, so you segment out or include only your brand keywords, just because a lot of those are going to be around 10s and converting very well.
Or so I could see you do something like with condition like label name equals branded. So if you made like labels for all your branded keywords, you could examine those.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Wow, I'm getting good. I'm getting good at this. Not really. I want to add that in there. I know.
So in here, we're in our keyword iterator, and kind of similar to how we were cycling through every ad group. This time, we're going through the keywords, except this time, we're going to kind of do, just follow this format, make it real simple. So total
conversions
plus equal. And what this does is it kind of keeps a running total. So it keeps the total of these conversions right here and then adds what is to the right of this.
So
stats
dot get conversions.
And so now we have our conversions in there. Now we have one of our last steps in here is one of the things that Google doesn't have built in, and you'd have to calculate it anyway, kind of like you do on a pivot table, is the CPA, which you can get through some of the, the downloadable reports. But, if we were just taking CPAs here, we would start ending up, possibly just averaging averages. So it's just as easy, like your click-through rate, to go ahead and just calculate it itself. So we can go in. We can go it short, save a little time, call it CR for conversion rate, set it to 0. And then right here, you see this, the CTR is equal to the quality score map, key, total clicks, total impressions, and that's kind of a mouthful, especially if you're not
right. So it looks like it's just saying, like, it's taking, this is the data that it's compiled, and then this is what the calculation it's making using that data, right?
Yep. It's just it's a few different parameters here, but it tells you it's pulling from the quality score map, which is all this is pulled. The key, which is the keyword, then takes that, the quality score of it, the total clicks of that level, the quality score, the total impressions, and then multiplies them out by 100
to get the
percent rate.
Right.
So what we do is go to CR and then set that to equals. And here is a good tip that'll save you a lot of time.
Just copy and paste?
Yep.
And then we just change. So for conversion rate, it would be total conversions divided by the total clicks. And you could do this with the cost per conversion too. So it'd be taking, in this case, you'd make the customization where it says total cost divided by total conversions, and it'll do the same thing, just making these same code customizations to get all that data, right?
Mm-hmm. And then the last thing you would have to do is this is where this row value is what's actually going to go on the spreadsheet.
Okay.
So what you want to do is you see, it's kind of like we saw in the header. First, we're going to select our number of keywords, put that in the first cell, go over a cell, put our impressions, our clicks, our CTR, to fixed, cuts it to decimal points.
Right.
Which you can run it without that, but just for fun, if you want some time, just delete that, run the report, and you'll end up with fields with, out to 10 decimal places or so.
Oh, all the way up to 10? I mean, hopefully you don't end up inadvertently calculating pi at some point. But so yeah, definitely define a limitation there. But it looks like, and I'll let you keep typing there. But yeah, it looks like this is sort of a 3-step process to this particular script. One where you're defining the spreadsheet where it's going to go, and basically setting up like the home for the data. The second part is compiling the data, and then the third part is actually putting the data in there.
Mm-hmm. And then you enter that, and then similar to the CTR, since it's not part of this quality score map, all you have to do is CR. Nope, you enter right there.
Dot
2
fixed.
And then just put it down to 2, and then there you go.
So it definitely seems like there is sort of a logic to the language now. You just have to kind of learn. It really is. I mean, I guess that's why they call it a language, but it is akin to learning a different language because you just have to think about this in a way. Just speak the language essentially, right?
That's part of it, and this is a good way to learn because you're just making small tweaks. And the good thing is, as you would expect, any programmers at Google are pretty good, and they have good standards and structure built in, which adds a logic to the logic that's already there. So it makes it a little easier to figure out.
Right. Because I can imagine without that, so there's that note there that says output data to spreadsheet. I would have never have come up with that information without seeing that in there. But so that's the part where we compile the quality score, and it seems like in order to do the same thing for average position, it's just making these same customizations to that part of the script as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, and one last thing.
Oh, okay.
So much up there. The rows are now also A columns.
Oh, see, exactly. So that's why you've got to be consistent, because I would have missed that and all of a sudden be wondering where my data went.
Yep. And then you look down, you see another comment right here for the average position. And we won't go through that one today, but it's almost exactly the same, except for some of these values.
You're still just entering like total conversions, all that same language is being used in the same way, just for a different metric.
Yeah,
So
you'll pretty much just do the same thing. I was going to say one of the differences, if you look at this get range here, it's going to be a little different just because it's, it has to go further down the sheet to make room for the quality score. But the same thing still applies. We would add our conversion rate, set that back out to 8, and just kind of repeat the process through there. And then, maybe that's good for practice. You kind of just sinks in a little bit.
yeah, a little bit. All right, so that's super helpful, and it can definitely add in some of the stuff that you were missing, especially that average position script, because usually doing a calculation or a table like that would require making a pivot table off your data and then manually grouping these numbers together to get them into, depending on how far out you go with the average position number, you'd have to do some grouping to actually get like actionable data out of it. So it seems like it's a little bit more helpful just to automate this process.
Yep, it's very quick, and it's one of those easy things that you can pull the insights right out of it. There's been a few times, if a client's asking you, why are we down towards the third position, and you pull this and you show it over time and say, we tried going up to the first position once.
It just didn't really work.
It's just you weren't getting enough conversions to make up for the cost, since so many people just sometimes intentionally, sometimes inadvertently click that first add-on there.
Yeah, click and just bounce off the landing page. So again, just some good stuff in there you can use to get some insights in your account, some automated insights. So the third script we can talk about is just it seems like it's just a basic campaign copier. So can you tell me a little bit about this script?
This script, it actually, let's say, sorry, it doesn't have a link. For some reason, it was up on Google Solutions page, and then when I went to make this PowerPoint, it wasn't there. I'm not sure, maybe they were modifying and changing something about it. We'll still go through the process because it's pretty informative.
Right.
And this can save a few minutes to actually hours. Because one of the things that happens is an education client I work on, very, very large, lots of campuses.
Lots of campaigns.
Yeah, lots of campaigns. And you can imagine, when you start dealing with hundreds of thousands of keywords, it can get rather tedious doing it through Excel, and it can really just kind of bog down your computer.
Yeah, and especially if you're like trying to post those changes through the AdWords editor, which can take, like I know I did a little bit of work with you on this particular client setting them up, and it was blocking off a couple of hours on a Saturday to get this stuff uploaded because the upload process took so long. There was so much data for it to crunch through. So yeah, I can see how this might help.
Actually, it reminded me, I was going to tell the director who's walking by me, I was working on this client, I said, if you see me at my desk not doing anything, it's because I'm working on this client.
Because I'm waiting for this to upload, and my computer can literally do nothing else.
So, a few example uses, you could, take parts of a campaign, move it over. You could, switch up your match types, if you have campaigns separated by match types, putting them all back into one campaign,
right?
Just separating out those ad groups. Or just what we'll do today is breaking it down by labeling some ad groups and then moving those over.
Okay. So what changed in this particular script with the modifications that you made to it?
So one of the easy things is just like the ad creator we used, this one's going to look a lot more complicated, but it's really just changing the selector.
Okay.
Everything else you can think of, the logic's still the same. I just want to use a different value.
Okay.
And then secondly, if you are running on a very large account, these scripts can run for up to 30 minutes. So you can imagine on a very large process, they might time out, and you want to know where it picked up so you aren't just duplicating the same thing over again.
Okay, well, let's see how you do that.
Let's go back. Okay, so one of the things that's going to go up here is you're going to see these two arguments. This is going to be your campaign name and your new campaign name. And that is where you'll put those, and this will be the original, and this will be where it's supposed to go. One of the things, we've talked about, creating ads or something, but Google High has the stance that there are so many things that go into a campaign, so many settings you can set, everything like that, that you cannot automatically create a campaign through AdWords. So if you want to use this, just make sure you already have created a target campaign.
Yeah, so the destination for it to go. Because otherwise, and yeah, make sure when you do that, you also don't inadvertently opt into display if you're not planning on doing display. But yeah, so it seems like you should in this case, do a little bit of prep work beforehand, like just creating the container for which this is going to go in.
Mm-hmm. And this is actually one I've already kind of modified.
Oh, well, yeah, let's just highlight where the changes then. I don't need to.
Okay. This is a little more complicated, and sometimes, I would say don't go this route right away because there are some people, depending on their structure, it gets a little buggy. What this does right here is it's called a function, and it creates the labels. I would advocate, if you're just starting out, make it easier and just create the labels yourself.
Pre-existing. Okay.
Use a pre-existing. So then we have this, and it selects our source campaign, our target campaign, kind of like we did with some of the selectors before.
Right.
And then now we have these functions which break down each part. So copying the ad groups, creating the ad groups, copying the keywords, creating the new ones. So one of the things we want to do is, imagine for that client we were talking about, I don't want to do every single ad group. I just want to move over part of my nursing keywords. I want to separate out my associate's degree from my bachelor's degree ones.
Right.
So I can go in and label all of my keywords or all my ad groups that target maybe the bachelor's degree with a copy. And this is kind of like we talked about with condition. Label name contains any
just copy.
And the difference between this, earlier we just showed the label name contains or equals copy, which means it's that, but the contains any means if I really wanted to, and I had, maybe I'm using a different label structure, that's something that already exists.
Like maybe you're copying a branded campaign or something like that, and you labeled them as such too.
Yeah, so let's say we wanted to move over some branded stuff. And move that. So now what that does is it says label name contains any of copy or branded. So it selects both of those and then goes through the next process.
And I assume you could make that, it's kind of like a Boolean string where it's like any or both.
I could imagine there's also situations where you could put does not contain if you want to move everything but something. So then you go through and it goes through the, that same kind of logical condition while there are still ad groups, start processing them. And then the one thing that we're going to do right here down at the bottom that changes it, this is how we know when things have been done. Source ad group, which is what we're currently working on. So each time it goes through the list of ad groups, the next one is assigned the value of the source ad group.
Okay.
That was kind of a lot, but hopefully kind of follow along with it.
I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes.
And then we go into our source ad group and then just use another method on there, remove label, and take the copy label off of it. And then once it's been copied, go ahead and apply the label copied.
So what this will do is, so if my logic is correct, this can kind of help you save your progress. So if the script does in fact time out, then it's just running the script again, and it'll start off with the ones that still say copy, because the ones that have already been copied have had their label changed. Is that right?
Yep, everything that's been copied will be switched over to copied. And, it's not necessary because you might, in some situations, I just want the copy label gone and I'll know it's done. But in others, you might just want it for quality assurance reasons.
Right.
So you can go back through your list of copied and just make sure that those are there.
Those are the ones you actually want copied over. Okay, well, that makes some sense to me, I think. I'm assuming it makes more sense to those of you at home and at work. But I've still got my notes, so we're good. And then, so this last script is how you can pause ad groups with declining stats. And it looks like there's another original link to the original script there. But the initial incarnation of the script is it would pause an ad group based on the past 3 weeks of data. And if the metrics continue to decline over time, the script would pause the ad group. So this can save you time by automatically removing poor performing parts of your account. And doing so, like especially the ones that have had sort of a slow decline, it seems like the ones that you would miss, like in just looking at like just past 30 days, you'd see like, oh, okay, so it's this. I'm not seeing the slow decline. I'm just seeing like the average. So this might be a good way to help you look at trends in the account. And just save you, as I think you've written here, 30 minutes in any week, depending on the size of the account, and just automates the process of doing this analysis.
Yeah, and you don't have to use this for finding everything that's not doing well. There's lots of things you're just going to make small tweaks on your own.
Right.
But especially maybe something in lead gen where you're trying new ad groups, there are definitely going to be those situations where something spends a bunch of money, nothing happens, and you're going to pause it anyway.
Right.
Just imagine if you have a CPA of 100 and this has gone already, kind of using that CPA matrix we use in here, spent 5 times the CPA goal without converting, I'm going to pause it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's changed in this instance of the script? So what modifications did you make to it?
So what this does is this kind of, maybe kind of sums up a lot of the things we've done today. We'll actually go to the next one. So the CTR is great. I got way ahead of ours.
Yeah, yeah. So it seems like the one recurring theme that happens with all these Google scripts is that they're using CTR as their main key performance indicator. They're not necessarily concerned with what we're concerned with, which is conversions, conversion rate, cost per conversion. So yeah, I'm assuming we make some similar tweaks to this to get that data in there.
And what we're going to do here is we're going to, instead of just looking at our CTR, we're going to start looking at our CPA. And if that starts to creep up, then I start getting worried. And maybe, like we said before, I want to actually pause something.
Right.
So what we're going to do is switch back out.
Okay, we're going to go back into the code. So brace yourself.
Back into the matrix, as some people around here call it. So one of the things you see right here is we have, similar, I feel like a broken record here, saying, look, we have another iterator. You should just get comfortable with those because you're always going to be using them. And right here, Google's already formatted out our dates. So our get day in the past, get 7 days in the past, 14 days, 21.
Okay.
And what that does is, in the AdWords scripts, you can see right here in this comment, they use the year, month, date format, not necessarily the format that JavaScript natively uses.
Right.
So if you want to search for something, you need to have it in that format. If you want to search for something that's not last 7, last 14, last month.
Right. So it looks like, so the variable, so get date in the past, so when you're defining to 0, so that says on the day that you're running the script, then you're that's when you're defining it going backwards, right?
Yep.
So day 0, and then 7 days in the past, 14 days in the past, and then 21 days in the past. All right. So I'll take this one. You can take a break. I'll try and explain this particular script. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. No. But so it looks like so the iterator, so the has next. So we're going through setting more variables where we look at the CTR and then compare them to one another. Is that right?
Yep, that's exactly right. And you could think of it's almost the same thing. And this is probably one of the biggest hurdles when you first get into writing a script or something, is it's not just knowing what everything does, but how to do it.
Right.
And I think it sounds like you're kind of on that track. Instead of looking at our CTR, let's get the values for our CPA or conversion. So we can compare those.
So how do we make that customization?
So one thing we're going to want to do is, we haven't really highlighted it, but I mean, if you're just making small changes, easy enough. But you see these brackets here, and this kind of is called a scope, and it kind of, breaks down what happened. I'm pointing with my hand, but you can't see that, of course. What happens in between these brackets, and if you're using an editor, it'll highlight them. If you're using in the AdWords editor, you can click on a bracket or a parentheses, and it'll show you where it closes.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that what happens in between these brackets stays in these brackets.
Yep, exactly. So one thing you want to do is, we talked about we want our conversions. So we're going to need to have new variables for conversions. Say conversions 1.
And then so we're defining it as that, like getting the stats for 3 weeks ago and 2 weeks ago.
Yep. And I would say
just copy and paste again.
Yep.
You got to work smarter, not harder.
As you can imagine, as I'm sure they saw earlier when I was trying to type the word conversions, you can make lots of errors manually typing things out on your own.
Definitely. But yeah, so in this case, you're making the same change to each of these variables where you're defining like the comparison you're making. So conversion 1 is 3 weeks ago versus 2 weeks ago. Conversion 2 is 2 weeks ago versus 1 week ago. And then conversion 3 is just for the last week. Is that correct?
Yes. Then
Okay, so we have our conversions here then. So what's the next step?
So the next step is, if we want to write it out fully, we also need, the other part of our CPA is our cost.
Right.
So we'll need to pull down that cost. So we can go ahead and...
So here is where we're compiling the conversion and the cost data, and then I'm assuming at some point we then make the calculation to do the CPA, and then that's how we determine when stuff gets paused. Is that right?
Yep, and then at cost and... we're on time. Okay. So know if it was going to go all the way through or do the abbreviated version?
Nah, just go ahead. We've come this far.
I'll say we should have brought the Jeopardy theme song on the background.
No. All right, so we have our conversions and our cost. They're ready to be pulled in with this particular change to the script, right?
Yep. So now we have those, and you could have written this out a little bit, I would say simpler, but then it's also a lot murkier, if that makes sense. You can write it out in one line, but it's harder to read. So one of the things I want to do for my CPA is, I already have this conversion value and the cost value. I can just divide those by each other.
Okay, so variable. So we've been do variable like CPA 1 equals then dividing conversion 1 by cost 1 or something like that, right?
Cost 1 by
conversion 1.
1.
And then make sure you change the variable name over there.
To conversions, yep, or CPA.
CPA. All right, so then we're going to copy and paste those in just for the sake of both time and effort again. So it'll be some easy changes, but it looks like
we'll have to switch those numbers over.
Yeah, but it looks like there is. I think I'm starting to grasp some of the basic concepts here because it seems really consistent. Like just make these changes. It seems kind of akin to some Excel formulas at times. Just it's a different language, but the same sort of rule set comes into play.
Mm-hmm. It's almost exactly the same, and that's why you see this is really long here, but all it's really doing is saying, for these stats right here, go ahead and pull the cost. And we can use that because it's already built in.
Right.
Kind of going through that reference material or messing around with these, you'll kind of figure out what they are. And one of the nice things is in the actual AdWords interface, the environment actually kind of has like an auto suggest in there.
Oh,
so
okay.
you can see as you start to work with the stats object, it pulls up a little menu drop down where you can select get cost, get clicks, get conversions.
Does it have the same annoying paperclip, or is it okay?
There's no paperclip,
okay,
for better or worse.
Good.
It'll just be you and the script.
Okay, so it looks like now we have it set up to look at the CPA and the variable there. So how do we make the determination to pause these ad groups?
So as we can imagine, like we said earlier, it's almost the exact same thing, except instead of looking at our CTR, we are going to be looking at our CPA instead.
So if I'm looking at this script correctly, and I think I might be, we'll be changing. So if CPA1 is greater than CPA2 and CPA2 is greater than CPA3, which means essentially that we've been seeing or less than or greater than, depending on which way we want to go, we're seeing a trend in our CPA that we're against. So like it might be an increase in CPA, then this is where we define that, and then it makes the determination to pause the ag group. Is that correct?
Exactly. And then the one thing that might not hit you right off the bat is to think, if my CPA is rising, but it's still below my goal, of course I wouldn't want to pause my ag groups. That makes sense, So if I'm already $20 under my CPA goal and I start to creep up a little bit week over week, if I'm still under goal, why would I want to pause it? That would just be losing those conversions.
Yeah, exactly. So what can you do to kind of guard against that?
So you can add just another logic condition.
Okay.
So we'll make a variable for our let's call it CPA max. That's as high as we want it to go. Maybe it's not necessarily our goal, but it's where we want to make the cutoff.
Right.
So let's say it could be anything, but for the example, let's just use $120.
Okay. Let's. I think that's a safe assumption.
So one of the things is this if statement evaluates everything between these two parentheses. So it's looking at this and this, but we want to make this new rule that says I only want to evaluate this if I'm greater than my CPA max.
Right.
So if, put another smaller one, and then this is kind of just like the going back to the math.
Oh yeah, so we're doing more algebra.
I still remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally.
Yeah, the order of operations. It continues to exist in JavaScript form. So if you thought you could get away from algebra in this far into your careers, you might be mistaken, depending on your experience with scripts.
Okay, so we'll have to go with our first one that we had in there. CPA1 is greater than CPA max, and then we close that off. And then, similar to this, we said if CPA1 is greater than CPA2 and CPA3, and CPA2 is greater than CPA3, what we want to do is we have these two separate statements now, and we're just going to put an and in between them, and then having them parentheses, kind of make sure those are evaluated before we go to this. So we have to be greater than the max, and the CPA has to be getting worse week over week.
In order for these ag groups
to be
paused.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then kind of similar, if you create a label, we talked about it earlier, let's say ag group dot apply label, and maybe I make one called paused for CPA, and I put that in there. So then if it is paused, it's also going to go ahead and apply that label and say, this is why it was paused, and that makes it easy if I'm using this automated solution to go back and check what happened later.
Yeah, it's kind of help you apply like a little bit of account oversight and make sure that you're comfortable with the actions that were taken, like on behalf of your account management with this script. Okay. So some of the other things that are possible with these scripts, so there's plenty of stuff that's still out there for you to experiment with. You can also create reports using Google Spreadsheets and Google Charts, and using some of the customization snippets that we've talked about today, you can make similar edits to these as well. You can also automate simple account checks for major performance changes, kind of like what we just discussed, right?
You could set it up like that where it pauses things, or you can just set it up just to check the actual performance. It's one of those things, most accounts run, or a lot of accounts run very similar day to day. But there might be chances where if you have an account that runs, kind of like clockwork during the week, and then you have that one day where all of a sudden, one of your metrics changes by like 15 to 20%, you might want to know about that.
Right.
Even if you aren't directly in the account, and you can set something up like that to go ahead and shoot you an email when that happens.
Yeah.
You can also set up, Google has a few examples of that, customizable bid rules. So you can set, what you want your bids to be. Let's say if kind of what we just did, if your CPA starts crawling up, go ahead and get the keywords in that ad group and bid them down, maybe 10%.
Okay. And then it looks like, so we talked about this a little bit using the AdWords query language. Is that right?
Yes.
So you can get very adventurous and automate the keyword mining process, or you could probably export those to a spreadsheet too, right?
Yes, you can. And Google actually has their own example of that, and kind of like some of the other examples we went through, especially for an SQR adding keywords to your account, it's slightly terrifying because it runs based off CTR. So it looks at the CTR of your search queries and adds them based on that.
So
you get some weird stuff.
So maybe you'd want to customize this script to add in the conversion data, and then also add a label on there that says added from SQR script or something like those lines, something along those lines. So I think there's a lot of possibility for improvisation and customization with these scripts based on some of the stuff that you've taught me about today. So I'm kind of interested in seeing what else we can combine together and come up with. So and I'm looking forward to seeing what you put out with the scripts library coming forward too. So we have our third live poll question, and it's kind of asking you, so would you like to receive, so A is a free solutions blueprint account assessment for paid search accounts with over $20,000 a month in ad spend. B, so there's also an extended free trial of PPC Hero Pro for 30 days, which is, again, it's been extended from our original 7-day trial to 30 days for webinar attendees only. And this is a special limited time offer, and it expires on October 30th. So it's coming up quickly here. So if you want to take advantage of that, definitely act on it quickly. And to make use of it, you can use this code. I'm going to get these numbers right, I swear. It's PPC Hero Pro 576-38291. Again, that code is PPC Hero Pro 576-38291. And you have the option to also receive both or neither.
And the one cool thing about PPC Hero Pro is, we've kind of talked about scripts today, but if you aren't just interested in scripts, there are also, quite a few apps on there that are pretty cool. And with this extended offer, instead of having the 7 days to evaluate the apps for like ad testing and everything, you get the full 30 days to test it out.
Well, great. So yeah, I think it's something a really kind of compelling offer out there. It's free, so there's no risk.
Nope.
Not at all.
You can leave it any time.
All right. So usually we have a live Q&A at this point, but we're right up to the brink of the end of the allotted time we have for this. So any questions you have, Secret Jake will answer them because he knows more about coding than I do. But yeah, feel free to send them over to us, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have about scripts, about some of the customizations we've discussed, and we'll be happy to get in touch with you about that. And probably you can put it up on PPC Hero, right?
Yep, it'll. We can put it up there and maybe help someone out, because if you have the question, someone else probably has the same question too.